Okay, so while we get ready to glaze, there's a couple of things that you need to have in front of you. This is the glaze plan book for your class. You'll have to have that, but before you do this, you're going to look at to see what glaze combination you would like to have in this book. You have your piece you're going to glaze that has been bisque fired and properly labeled, of course. The glaze choices, which we'll get to in a second. Brushes that are for glazing. They are a teal blue color. The newspaper that you will place under your work. But before we get there, we're going to choose what color. Inside this book are Potter's Choice layering combinations. I have chosen this one. It'll look something like that. They're not going to be exact. This is textured turquoise over iron luster, which means iron luster goes on first and then textured turquoise. These are the colors that are that they would look like if they were by themselves. This is what they look like, or close to it, if they are layered. So after I choose this, I'm going to come to the Glaze Plan's 10th period for this year, and I'm going to write it down. So this is how you do it. That's why it's on the front page. So it says, for glaze labeling, you put your name, the date, describe the piece you're glazing, the colors you're going to use. So this is color 1, and times how many layers, and that's under the undercoat, and the second color, whatever its name is, and how many times, and that goes over. And at the end, you're going to add notes, whether you liked it, whether it went well. I should have added 1 more layer. I shouldn't have added 3 layers, whatever the case may be. So here I have filled out the proper way. It says Mrs. Roach, dot mug with handle. This is what it looks like, dot mug with handle. Today's date, and then I'm going to choose iron luster with times 2 coats, and that goes on under. And then my second color is texture turquoise times 3 coats, and that's over. So I'll leave my notes after I'm done firing it, what I thought of it. So I'm going to write this down so I don't lose track of it. I'm going to iron luster times 2 under texture turquoise times 3 over. So I'll be able to keep this next to me so I don't lose track. Then this goes back by the glazes, and I put these away because we don't want to mess those up. So now I'm going to spread my newspaper out over my work area. I have already gotten the 2 glazes that I'll be using. This is iron luster. Make sure it says the right name, and then I'm going to read the directions. It says, shake well before use, thin with water or Amico gun solution if needed. Apply 3 coats of glaze to cone 04 bisque. Glaze fire to cone 5 or 6. So before I shake it, I'm going to make sure that the lid is on. This has happened and caused a huge mess, and it's very expensive, so it's wasteful also. Make sure it's on and shake. And I'm going to do the other with textured turquoise as well. Apply 3 coats of glaze to cone 04 bisque. Let the glaze dry between coats. All right, so I've shaken it up and I have my notes here, and I also have a pencil or a pen. So when I make a coat, I'm gonna make sure I put a mark saying I already did one. So if you forget, that will be marked. So I've already shaken the iron luster, which I need 2 coats of. So I carefully open, and then I take off this. Okay, I'm gonna put that here. All right, so now I'm going to very evenly, but you want it kind of medium thick, start at the bottom on the inside. And go all the way around, making sure that there is absolutely no bisque showing. No clay can show. So I chose to do the inside first because while that's drying, I can glaze the outside. Now, as a reminder, glaze has chemicals in it that will create a chemical change to make it a solid after it's fired. So you want to make sure you do not touch your mouth, eat food, drink a drink, and before you leave you must wash your hands. So the entire inside is completely covered. There is no bisque showing. Now I'm going to flip it over. Notice I put my brush so it does not sink down into the glaze. That's a waste. So I tilt it so it's on its side. And I turn it over. Now I trimmed the middle, so I'm going to use a smaller brush to do the detail, because remember, we're glazing with a dry foot. So the foot of the artwork will not have glaze on it, and I carefully move the glaze around around the bottom, making sure not to get it on the edge, because again, we have a dry foot. Okay, now I'm going to turn it on its side and glaze up until about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. This is why I glaze the inside first. And remember, between coats, the glaze has to completely dry. Otherwise, you're just adding to the same layer. You have to have separate coats that are dry in between. So I am using the smaller brush to do the edges. And I'm going very slow and having a controlled brush. Now I can change to my larger brush and put it on the dry foot. This is not glazed, so I can put it on the paper. And I switch out my brushes, making sure it does not sink into the bottom. And I'm going to then make sure I cover the entire thing with glaze, getting all the textures if you have a texture. So when you are making coil pots, you will have a lot of texture. You need to make sure there is no bisque showing. You do not want the glaze to drip, but you don't want it on too thin. You'll notice in some of the dots of the cup, they'll kind of pool, but I'll move it around a little bit with my brush. Making sure that I'm not using the brush to scrub it in. That's not how we use a brush properly. You just gently turn. I'm going to hold it by its making sure that I have filled every texture. And then the last thing I will do on coat 1 is the rim, because the dry foot will be sitting on the newspaper, and I won't be able to touch the handle because it will be drying of its first coat, making sure I get in the crevice of everything. Now I can let it sit while I do the handle. The first thing I do on the handle is the underside. And in the center, and then I do the rim. Now this has to completely dry, so there is no shininess. You'll see that it's shiny. If it is towards the end of the period, you will have to put it away while it's wet, or you can use another tool that is a daily tool. We have a hairdryer. And you can use that if you want. Now, I have finished one coat, so I have one is done.